So, ladies and gentlemen, we are very happy to welcome you in this special workshop on the place and the role of police in the juvenile justice system. We have today three speakers. First, Mrs. Norman from Norway, then Mr. Chris Graverson from New Zealand, and Mr. Laurent Sinsart from France. I will give them the floor for 20 minutes maximum each, one of them, and I will be a policeman myself for the time to speak, and then it will be a participative workshop. That means you may ask questions. In front of you, you have a microphone, and I will be also a policeman so that there is no two or several persons to speak together at the same time. We have to be very strict on the procedure so that there is no misunderstanding. And please, when anybody speaks, please speak not too quickly, because we have 5 translators for this workshop, and we thank the translators. It is an opportunity to thank them for their difficult work. And please speak not slowly, but don't speak too quickly so that everybody can understand. So I would like first to give the floor to Mrs. Norman from Norway, and I would like to ask all the three speakers to introduce themselves at the beginning of their presentation, briefly, to say what is your position, mainly what is your position in your respective institution and ministries. So, Mrs. Norman, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Anna-Brita Norman, and I work in the Ministry of Justice in Oslo and in the police department. And the topic I would say a little bit about today is the cooperation between the local police and the local helping bodies or authorities. And is it okay? And then under the heading like the development of an alternative to penal measures for young offenders in Norway through a restorative approach. And that has been developed from a local project to a national legislation. I'm not a police officer, I'm a lawyer, and I have been working with developing this legislation for about 10 years, from the first projects and until the new legislation, the last piece of it was put into force this summer. So, dear colleagues, I would certainly like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you and to share our experiences. I think that is one of the main issues for us all. If we do something that works, we should share it. And if we do something that doesn't work, I think we should share even that, so others can avoid the same mistakes. Every society has then an obligation to protect their inhabitants. They have to grant the safety and protection also from offending minors. Efforts to help and care for young people who are in danger zone for developing a criminal career is a vital part of this responsibility. To stop the individual young offender from developing this career requires a close follow-up and close transprofessional cooperation between the justice system, including the police, as the gate to any intervention in a criminal case, and on the other side, the child protection and the welfare society. Then? For the police, is like a colleague said, the gate to any criminal case. Their contribution through potentially competent and compassionate police work has proven to be a key factor when dealing with young offenders. When the police and the child welfare and school or healthcare systems cooperate, it's like they are getting a little bit of each other's competence. The police has the authority, are meant to set the borders, and are, at least in Norway, respected, thought well of actually. And the other bodies, they have the competence for child welfare, psychology, teaching, languages, whatever is needed, what it takes to bring a child back on track. I would also have to mention that in Norway, the prosecution authorities, they, at the lowest level, they are a part of the police. They are sitting in the same buildings. They are working closely together. So their cooperation in the phase of investigation and the count for the indictment has always been solid. The new issue at this stage of a criminal case is the extended cooperation and contact with various helping bodies. Especially for the police, for all of us, there could be a conflict of interest. As I mentioned, the right of society to be protected and the best interest of the child. But maybe for the police, this can really be an issue. If they are in a situation with a violent minor and a maybe severely harmed victim, still they are obliged through the convention to have the best interest of the offending child in their mind. It's much easier to have the compassion for the victim. So, what we have learned in Norway through various projects locally in the last 2 years is that investing time and resources in young offenders may prevent reoffending. Norwegian governments, in plural, and the Parliament have for several years focused on creating better interventions for young people who commit crimes. Preventive measures, which was a topic for the session previous, are important. The increased cooperation between the police and prosecution on one side and the helping bodies on the other, along with increased use of restorative justice and penal reactions with a rehabilitative approach. Many of them are developed through political decisions and local projects. And again, it has taken all the various professions, including the police, to do this. And we haven't in Norway had this kind of experiences before. It has been the justice system on one side, that has been the helping bodies on the other side. I started my career in the beginning of the 70s as a professional social worker with an office in the main police station of Oslo doing child welfare. Later I became a lawyer. But thinking back on the relations we had in the 70s, it is so different from what we have today, where the police officers and the child welfare and the social officers really work together towards the same aim, to really pull someone out of a life outside society. It is, of course, an important aim, and we all share, a child should not go to prison. Therefore, efforts have been made, and they are still being made, to increase the use of these alternative sanctions, according to the requirement of the UN Convention. It's already mentioned that it should only be used in exceptional cases. And I sometimes ask, when a case is considered and a child goes into detention in any way, is it really the last possibility? Has it really been thought through any other possibility? And I think we still have a way to go in these questions. offending, as my colleague said, seriously or repeating by children, that's a sign that their lives are troublesome. And without the necessary interventions called on in many different ways, for instance, by offending, they are asking to be seen by offending. And why do they do that? We need to find out. Otherwise, we cannot find the right measures. Of course, poverty, insufficient parental care, lack of assistance from school, a lot of things can happen. And they cannot get free of their own responsibility. But we need to have that in our heads when we try to think out how can we rehabilitate this child. I'm sorry for the ones that are not English spoken, but this is an illustration made by a colleague as we drew up a plan. And the main thing is that a young person and the coordinator of various measures that could be done, they are in the center. So around these central people, you see all the bodies. You see the police, you see the prosecution, sometimes the court. That depends. But it's just a way to show that it's not an easy task to find out what is the best way to help this child. It was mentioned earlier today that it's vital to keep a child, a young offender, out of court. In Norway, we are not focused on keeping them out of court. We are focused on finding a reaction that can help them. And for the minor crimes, that can be decided by the prosecution. But for the severe crimes, they need to go to court. But the court now, with the new legislation, has the possibility to give an alternative reaction to not custodial, but in society, carried through the mediation offices and with the help of many various bodies, but always the police. And again, the need for having this authority. As one of the project workers said, when I said maybe they don't need to use the time, the police, to go into these follow-up meetings if everything is okay. And he said, you're totally wrong. That's when they are really needed, because if someone they trust in a uniform say, you're doing fine, they will continue to do fine. So we think that criminal acts, they need a clear sanction, which should be imposed by the society, but we also need to remember that it's not only the nature of the behavior which should be considered when choosing a sanction, or the immediate wish for revenge. The young offender's need for help and support to take responsibility is the vital one. So this foil here is a result of the projects and now the new law. All the colors means that parts of it can be implemented by the prosecution authorities. Some cases have to go to court. And on the right side of on the other side, that is during serving of a sentence. I have no time to go in on that, but they also have some special restorative measures that could be made then. The new legislation launches then a major reform, a new criminal sanction for young offenders, the juvenile sanction, and it was passed in December 2011, but it was put in force in July, 1st of July in 2014. This new legislation also presented a number of other legal provisions protecting children, which we cannot use any time on now, but even then, there are new measures important for the police. In criminal cases for children under the age of 18, and there is an obligation for the police to notify the municipal child welfare service, and then they have to be present at the court hearing if it's appropriate to remain in custody anyone under 18. And again, the request for remanding in custody, it comes from police and prosecution. So if they can cooperate with the helping bodies, trying to find alternatives, seeing what can be done, it really gives a much, much better chance. There has also been extended the possibility and the obligation to require a pre-trial research for the children, so that they know what are the problems and what are the potentials. It's called a social inquiry report, and that is also taken into the legislation. There are some offences where an inquiry is mandatory, but it can also be chosen if that seems to be helpful. So the new juvenile sanction is diverting, but still penal. And the condition is that the criminal act was done before the age of 18. But the serving of the sentence may well be, even the court case may well be after they have been 18. So the crucial point is when it happened. And the really new thing is that it's implemented by the mediation board, not the correctional service, who has the responsibility for other sentences. One important thing is that this sanction requires the consent and participation of the minor offender and his or her parent. Otherwise, the case is submitted to the ordinary penal system. In other words, it's not being soft on crime, because there is this possibility to a traditional reaction. But it's going to put a great deal of work into motivating the young person and his guardians. And again, the offender must also accept the fact he is accused of. It's no use trying to work in a restorative way with someone telling, no, I wasn't there. It wasn't me. So, developing this sanction, the government has chosen to focus on restorative processes as they are developed by the mediation board in Norway, involving victims, offenders, and the community in deciding the consequences of illegal actions and harm caused. Today there are 2 mediation boards in Norway, and important is it's a public body, the mediation board. The Ministry of Justice and Public Security has the financial, professional and legal responsibility. A youth coordinator, which you saw in the middle of the other file, is responsible for carrying out the serving of a youth sanction throughout the whole period, and the period is set by the court when sentencing the case. The position of the coordinator is laid down by law, which makes it impossible to do the light version. It's going to be done properly. The carrying out consists of 3 mandatory elements: the conferencing meeting. The police is a mandatory participant at this conference, put into the legislation. And again, the reason is we need the police to be able to do this rehabilitation. And then there is, of course, the offender and his or her guardian, and relevant bodies are also invited to this often very long-lasting meeting. Thus, everyone involved hears the same story. And the impact of the young offender is overwhelming. There are tears and laughter, and no one can leave a meeting like that untouched, I promise you. And the conference also grants the clarification of the offender's life situation and specific needs. The victim is urged to participate, but they are not obliged to. And that was decided, although it's a restorative approach, because we couldn't have this risk at making a difference whether you had a sort of a kind victim or someone that didn't want to cooperate. Then the next point is the youth plan, which is mandatory outcome. If it's not signed, case goes back to the court. And the third is the implementation team, which is established around the young offender. And again, the police is asked to join in, and it's mandatory if it's a severe crime. So, the next step taken after the severe crimes was that even slightly less severe crimes are taken into the same system. The duration of the sentence is shorter and the control measures in the plan are lighter. But it's the same system, the same coordinator, the same mediation board, and the same involvement by helping bodies and the police. I think that is what I can manage in my time. I hope I gave an overview on this and hope we can discuss it afterwards.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much, and I imagine how frustrating it can be to be stopped after 20 minutes, but of course. During the workshop, during the debate, it will be possible also to add and complement some of the ideas. Thank you very much. So now I give the floor to Mr. Chris Graverson, who will introduce himself.
Yep.
I understood that you are retired.
Correct.
And can you explain a little bit briefly what were your position, which explain your experience?
20 minutes, Bernard, is it 20 minutes?
20 minutes.
Good.
Swiss time.
Swiss time. Has to be accurate. I've been threatening everyone if they go a minute over time, they buy a drink for everyone. My name is Chris Graveson. I retired from the police in 2012. I did 36 years police service, the last 17 specialising in juvenile issues, running the specialist police in New Zealand, the 300 of them that Judge Beecroft talked about. The first thing I will say, the place and role of police in juvenile justice is, in one word, significant. But it is not often understood what the role of police is, what the potential of police are, and in fairness to you all, to understand police, because even I'll admit some of them are hard to understand. But you will not find success in juvenile justice if you are not working with police. I will tell you that now. No matter what reforms you do, if you're not engaged with the police and they are not engaged with you, in one word, you will fail to bring about the change that is required. And what I hope to be able to do in this session is give you some ideas, some things to consider and issues to work through to bring them on board and engage with them. Oh, got to press the button. First of all, I want to talk about my values and principles in dealing with juvenile justice and children in conflict with the law. This comes about from experience, and you will see that some of these are consistent with international standards, but the first rule is when you're talking to a police, in fact, if you're talking to any audience, target your presentation for that audience. When you say to a group of police, human rights, it's like throwing a match in a can of petrol. They will react because they'll talk about their rights and the problems. So I talk about an accountability model, that children who offend should be held accountable. But the accountability is proportionate. We have to make it perfectly clear to juveniles that not conforming with the law is not acceptable. But I remind you all of us can make a mistake. And it's how we respond to that that will dictate the future of how effective we are. I say this to all of you. A first-time offender is an opportunity. It is not a problem. If you screen, do a quick assessment, it can often be an early indicator of bigger issues that you can deal with early. Just think of a medical model where we intervene quickly. Proportionality speaks for itself. Diversion is the start point. In other words, you have to justify prosecution. You don't justify diversion. That way, everyone thinks about keeping children out of the formal system, because if it's that serious, it will speak for itself. Family involved and engaged. I hear people talking at these conferences about children's rights, the Beijing rules, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, but I want to remind you all that the Convention and the Beijing rules talk about family being involved. And that is your start point to try to let the family, or at least engage them in the decision making. Why is it that everything in a child's life, the family is consulted, the parents are consulted, and yet when they become in conflict with the law, we assume they're not capable of it? Detention is used as a last resort. In other words, police just have other options besides arrest, and if they do arrest, we minimise the time. Why do we have to wait 24 hours to see if the arrest is justified? Police have the authority to arrest and detain. Police have authority to shoot people. Yet for some crazy reason, we don't give them the authority to release people. Keep them out of the system. And most of all, it's been touched on by other speakers, you must have a multi-agency approach. Everyone working together and working at cross purpose. So in other words, we overlap, we don't meet, we overlap. And here are three important words. In all my experience, if you're not doing these three things well, you will fail. And that is timeframes. Ensure that timeframes, things are done promptly. I can think of a case where a child, a very serious sexual attack on a 5-year-old, there was already a file what this offender was a suspect for, not dealt with time, reoffended. Good plans, good monitoring. Self-explanatory. Well, I added a quick slide, but this is the slide on supports for child. This is the approach I believe in from police. That first of all, the child's at the centre. The next intervention point is the parent. Then the extended family, then the community. And then we go to the state. Too often, if a child is in conflict with the law, we go straight from child to the state. And my experience has been, and I talk from experience, that this model works. I can hear some of you saying, well, it won't work for this person, and some it won't. And I'll say to you, you are right. But remember this. A lot of medical procedures don't work for people, but we still do those medical procedures. And some they work and some they fail. But we have to try. This is why I want to start and say, I was a big critic of juvenile justice reform when I was a police sergeant. And when I got into the business, I thought, how did I get it so wrong? And this is where I start to talk, because it was never taught well, it was never explained, and it wasn't put in an operational context. And this is the slide that converts you. What you see there, sure, it's old, it's 1990. But that is what happened when we went to a diversion model with police dealing with diversion, alternative action, family group conferencing. And it's been consistently like that. And crime did not go up, in fact crime dropped. Understanding policing. This is advice to you people if you're trying to understand police and work with them. When you're talking rights, how do you put things in a police context when you're talking to police? Don't think of it from your point of view as a rights point of view and children. Think about it how police would view it. Few people actually understand police work. And unless you've been in it, I really mean it, it's hard to understand. And just to give you an idea of some of the situations, I think of one of my sergeants, what we could deal with. He could be dealing with the community on children's issues and that. And one day, his level of specialisation was good. He was advising an investigation team dealing with a juvenile for a homicide, and he was actually flying in the helicopter with the investigation team. Actually, they were chasing a bus to get this juvenile. And that's the context of what they work in. Police deal with a range of issues. So where most of you here deal with child issues, they're dealing with a range of issues. So for them, dealing with children's issue is only one part of it. And hence the reason why police must have specialisation to develop that expertise. And the following speaker will cover that. Juvenile offenders, they add a level of complexity to a situation in a police environment. Whether they're a victim, or whether they're a suspect or a witness, juveniles or children add another level of complexity. And people forget that. And that's part of the reason why police don't like dealing with them. They're nervous. But at the same time, I want to remind you all, think in the last 20 years how police have responded to dealing with child abuse and the expertise they've developed. The tragedy is that revolution and change and expertise has not been carried over to juvenile justice. Police continually deal with problems and not solutions, and police generally feel often their issues are ignored. I'm not saying that's true, but that's what a lot will feel. Why do juvenile justice challenge police? These two go hand in hand. Police seldom have a strategic plan in relation to juveniles. To bring juvenile reform and deal with juveniles, it's a long game. And if you think you can go in and do a training session and do that, you're foolish. You've got to have two. You've got to have the strategic vision and you've got to have the training to back it up and the ongoing monitoring. Also because the lack of expertise in police, the two go hand in hand. Because of the lack of expertise makes developing a strategic plan difficult. So this is where people like yourself come in to understand. Police service sees, as I said, juveniles as a problem. A major problem is actually misinformation for police and never been shown how. And that was the lesson I learnt when I took over. Most people, I realised, did not know the law, a lot of misinformation. And often what you hear, and I've heard it here too, that people say, oh, we couldn't change our police won't do this, our police won't do that. What you're actually doing is I listen to that, and I say the same to police too. They talk about what they can't do. You actually talk yourself into a negative frame that it's not achievable. So what I always say is, this is how you do it. This is how you should do it. This is how you get around this. Police need to have an enforcement, Police need to have an engagement rather than an enforcement approach. But they haven't got the skills to be, and I'm talking generalisations here, for engagement because they don't know how, because the only model they know is enforcement. If you have an engagement place, you can easily go to enforcement, but once you have an enforcement model, engagement is difficult to achieve. And the other problem for police, many of their processes are based on what they have done and not on evidence. What I have observed is where police have reformed and worked in multi-agency approach and evidence approach to dealing with children in conflict with the law, offending rates drop. And that's consistent in a lot of jurisdictions at the present time. Police, they have a significant role to play. The first thing you have to remember is police are the first point of contact. And wherever there is a first point of contact, if that situation is handled well, chances of a good outcome improve significantly. It's no different to a person collapsing in the street and someone who gets to them straight away, knows first aid, can resuscitate them, the paramedics arrive, they know what they're doing. So what I'm saying, remember I said first time offence is an opportunity. They can identify at-risk children early. Victims of abuse are classic. A child who's been a victim of abuse, their risk factors of becoming a juvenile offender increase significantly. And specialist juvenile police facilitate early intervention identification. Right. Improved police practices. These are the keys for improved police practices. 1. Diversion is the default position. Charging must be justified. So this is where the prosecutors come into play too. And the juvenile should not go to court, or the file should not go to the prosecutor. The prosecutor should actually give police guidelines and saying, if you have this situation, divert, warn. Limitations on the use of arrest. In other words, you can't arrest. There has to be certain criteria met before arrest can occur. Avoid detention, avoid bringing them into the system. I haven't got time to go through guidelines for that, but I have those. If arrested, allow arrest without charge. If circumstances require it, release them on conditions of bail. No money, just conditions. Get them out of custody. We know detention's bad, get them out. If bail is not an option, in other words, if police cannot arrest, they should have to justify detention. Not because that's what we do. Because we have first-time offenders mixing with serious hardcore criminals, ideal recruiting ground for gangs and other criminals. I remind everyone, think about the paranoia there was about contracting Ebola in Britain and America. And just think if we took a fraction of that approach to stop cross-contamination between serious and low-level offending. Because the fact is, if you allow that contamination, you get a serious offender. And detention last resort, shortest period. Last slide. Specialist juvenile police. Laurent is covering this. Specialist juvenile police do not carry out investigations. They advise investigators. I do not agree with police investigators in just dealing with juveniles. All police have a responsibility, but you establish a skill base within that group of police, and they advise others. 2, have delegated authorities from prosecutors. In other words, these circumstances release, don't prosecute. Why bring them to court just to release them to justify arrest? Get them out of the system as early as you can. 3, diversion options. I hear us talking about restorative justice. Restorative justice, for me, does not kick in to about 60% of cases. The first one is just caution and warn. How long, Bernard? Okay. Is caution and warn and just release them. Do nothing. Just send them home, let the parents deal with it. And I can tell you, it works. And it's hard to accept. 2, intervention, alternative action. 3, restorative justice. They are the levels of intervention. I must end on this final point. Don't forget it. Assist the juvenile to a court to ensure good timeframes, good plans, good monitoring. What I can say to you is every police person who came to me and they had problems, they had big workloads, and they were looking at new strategies, new plans, I said, get your timeframes under control, just monitor your plans and work on it. And without exception, the numbers all dropped because the most important thing about working with police and for police, and in fact for all of you practitioners of juvenile justice, is sure people want to do fancy stuff, but do the basic things well. And this is what I tell all police. The better you do the basics, the better you will be at your job. And it applies to most jobs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graverson. I think the basket becomes very heavy for the discussion, for the debate. And before starting the debate, I will give the floor to Mr. Sinsart. I don't need to have the translation in French in my ears. The floor to Mr. Sinsart, who is coming from France and who has a long experience of training police on the international level with the National Service of Cooperation between Police from France. You have the floor.
Okay. Laurent Sinsart, je suis retraité de la police française après avoir passé 33 ans de service dans cette police, en partie au sein de la brigade des mineurs à Marseille, et j'ai fini ma carrière comme responsable du service de formation continue dans le sud de la France. Alors Chris a parlé du rôle que doivent avoir les policiers au sein de services en charge des enfants. Ce qui est intéressant, c'est de voir comment les policiers sont formés pour prendre en compte les enfants. Alors, globalement, ça va être une approche assez globale de la formation du policier, et on va essayer j'essaie d'aborder par la suite quelques thèmes de réflexion ou comment on peut changer les choses. Alors, ce qui est important de savoir, c'est relativement, grosso modo, la police est organisée en trois niveaux. Des policiers qui vont être sur la voie publique, des officiers qui vont avoir en charge le commandement opérationnel et des officiers supérieurs qui vont avoir en charge le management. Donc après le recrutement de ces policiers va avoir lieu une première formation initiale. Alors cette formation initiale va être axée sur différents thèmes, une formation technique, on va apprendre aux policiers à utiliser une arme, des techniques d'intervention, ils vont avoir des notions de droit, des notions de procédure pénale, des formations spécifiques comme la police de la route, le maintien de l'ordre et du management. Bien sûr, en fonction du niveau auquel vont être recrutés les policiers, les thèmes abordés vont être plus ou moins développés. Donc à l'issue de leur formation initiale, ces policiers vont rejoindre des unités et dans le meilleur des cas, si la police est bien organisée, vont pouvoir suivre une formation continue. Alors cette formation continue sera encore bien sûr le plus souvent, on va commencer par une formation technique, toujours, entretien de la formation technique, l'utilisation des armes, l'utilisation des techniques d'intervention. Ça va être la plus grosse part de la formation continue. L'autre part de la formation continue, ce sera la mise à jour des connaissances des policiers. Cette mise à jour va porter sur soit des textes législatifs qui viennent d'être mis en application, soit des nouveaux systèmes d'armes ou des nouveaux systèmes informatiques qui sont mis en place. Cette formation continue va aussi toucher l'évolution de la carrière. Un policier qui veut passer des échelons supérieurs va suivre des formations et donc acquérir de nouvelles connaissances. Et, in fine, on va avoir des formations spécialisées, des unités qui vont avoir une tâche bien précise, comme les groupes d'intervention, comme les unités de maintien de l'ordre, comme les unités qui vont gérer les infractions financières. Et le sujet qui nous importe aujourd'hui, les unités qui vont avoir en charge les enfants. Enfants pris dans le sens du droit de l'enfant, tout enfant, tout individu de moins de 18 ans. Donc comment est composée une brigade des mineurs? Il va falloir recruter des gens, des policiers. Alors l'idéal, c'est de recruter des policiers expérimentés, puisqu'en fait, il est beaucoup plus dur de gérer des cas d'enfants, que ce soit des enfants victimes ou en conflit avec la loi, que de gérer d'autres types d'infractions. L'idéal, c'est d'avoir des policiers volontaires. Alors, c'est pas toujours évident, puisque souvent dans la police, ce qu'on va appeler la grande police, ce qui fait rêver les gens, c'est aussi du trafic, gérer des trafics d'armes, des braquages, du trafic de drogue. C'est une tâche qui est, c'est vrai que assez enrichissante, assez prenante. Et pour les policiers, des fois, des policiers en investigation, gérer les cas des mineurs, des enfants, c'est une tâche un peu ingrate ou un peu mineure. Donc, mais malgré tout, une fois qu'on fait le tour, on peut s'apercevoir que ces unités, le travail dans ces unités le travail dans ces unités est très très intéressant, et on arrive globalement à avoir des volontaires. Alors, comment doit être composée la brigade des mineurs? Il est important qu'il y ait une certaine mixité dans la brigade des mineurs. Une parité homme-femme me semble importante. Souvent, on a tendance à mettre des femmes dans la brigade des mineurs parce qu'on estime que les femmes vont avoir plus de facilité à gérer des enfants. C'est pas forcément le cas. Les hommes ont leur place aussi. C'est pour ça que je pense qu'un ratio de 50% d'hommes et 50% de femmes est l'idéal. Ces policiers, une fois qu'ils ont rejoint la brigade des mineurs, vont suivre aussi une formation spécialisée. Alors une formation juridique sur tout ce qui touche au droit de l'enfant, une formation sur la connaissance de l'enfant, sur son développement physique, son développement psychologique, et des formations sur les techniques d'entretien avec l'enfant, que ce soit des enfants victimes ou que ce soit des enfants en conflit avec la loi. Souvent on part du plus difficile, un enfant victime, donc la technique d'audition d'un enfant victime peut facilement être appliquée à un enfant en conflit avec la loi. Alors ces formations doivent être entreprises et effectuées par à la fois des policiers expérimentés dans le domaine de la brigade des mineurs et aussi des experts qui vont venir d'autres sphères comme des médecins, des psychologues, des magistrats aussi, c'est important. Alors pour travailler, indépendamment d'un effectif, d'une formation, il va falloir doter cette brigade des mineurs de moyens, de locaux adaptés, puisqu'en fait il va falloir essayer de fournir à ces services des locaux différents où les enfants ne vont pas côtoyer en permanence des policiers armés avec des uniformes, avec des mouvements, des personnes adultes interpellées. Donc l'idéal c'est d'avoir un local à part, un matériel adapté aussi qui va répondre aux besoins de cette unité, un budget, puisque souvent on crée une unité, mais derrière il va falloir un budget d'entretien, de fonctionnement, et tout le matériel et le locaux, toute la logistique doit être en conformité avec les textes nationaux. Souvent on va avoir des textes qui vont prévoir l'enregistrement des auditions. C'est très bien de prévoir un texte comme ça, mais il va falloir équiper la police de systèmes d'enregistrement. Ça va nécessiter un budget, ça va nécessiter aussi une formation des policiers. Donc c'est des choses à prendre en compte quand on va créer une brigade des mineurs. Donc ça va être très important et l'ensemble va constituer une brigade des mineurs qui va être efficace. Alors bien sûr, on peut travailler avec des locaux qui ne sont pas forcément adaptés, avec une formation qui est moyenne, à partir du moment où on a des policiers qui sont investis dans leur travail. Alors une représentation assez schématique d'un pays, où on va avoir une capitale, En général, dans tous les pays, la capitale est l'endroit où il y a le plus de forces de police. Et c'est là où il est le plus facile de créer une brigade des mineurs, puisque ce sera aussi la vitrine de la police. Donc, dans la capitale, la plus grande ville, on va avoir une brigade des mineurs. Très bien. Ensuite, on va pouvoir créer ponctuellement, dans les plus grandes villes autour de la capitale, dans le pays, des brigades des mineurs plus petites. Alors, ça va dépendre de l'effectif, ça va dépendre de la volonté aussi politique du chef de la police, des moyens, de la priorité qu'il donne à la lutte, à la prise en compte des enfants. Par contre, dans les toutes petites villes, les points un peu éloignés, il n'y aura aucun service spécialisé. Donc là, vous, en tant que magistrat, vous aurez en face de vous des policiers qui vont prendre en charge des affaires d'enfants, sans avoir aucune formation, sans avoir été recrutés pour ça, et sans avoir aucun moyen ou budget spécifique pour travailler. Donc ces gens, peut-être ne seront pas les plus performants, mais ils sont qu'à moitié responsables, parce que en fait, je pense que si on leur donnait la possibilité d'être formés, d'avoir un équipement adéquat, ils seraient plus performants, ils accepteraient volontiers, ils seraient beaucoup plus performants. Donc c'est la façon dont les policiers vont travailler, c'est pour vous, avant de juger un policier sur la qualité de son travail, il est bon aussi de s'intéresser sur la façon dont il a été formé. Alors une fois qu'on a vu un enfant, donc, une fois que la brigade des mineurs est créée, l'enfant va être en contact avec un policier, soit qu'il soit victime, soit qu'il soit en conflit avec la loi. Mais souvent, l'enfant a, avant ce contact avec la police, une certaine représentation de la police, qui est bien souvent négative. Négative pourquoi? Parce que les images qu'on voit, les images qui sont diffusées, on diffuse sur Internet ou à la télévision, plus souvent de policiers qui vont faire preuve de violence, parce que c'est assez médiatique, que de policiers qui font bien leur travail. Un policier qui fait traverser quelqu'un, qui fait traverser une vieille dame dans une route qui est très fréquentée, ça n'intéresse personne. Pourtant, c'est important. Donc on va toujours présenter le policier dans cet aspect un peu négatif, violent. L'aspect du policier aussi, son uniforme, son équipement, les armes, les matraques, les menottes, tout ça c'est un peu la tenue, qui est aussi une tenue qui peut faire peur aussi. Et puis il y a aussi dans l'éducation. Dans l'éducation qu'on donne, volontairement ou involontairement, on peut donner une fausse image de la police. C'est-à-dire, en France, on a une expression qui est la peur du gendarme. Le pauvre gendarme, il est là simplement par sa présence. Il va dissuader les gens de commettre des infractions. Le terme peur du gendarme, s'il est expliqué, si on en parle devant les enfants, ça va les marquer. Ils vont capter cette perception du gendarme ou du policier comme quelqu'un qui est dangereux, qui peut être méchant. On a des fois dans nos propos, dans les conversations, si on s'est fait, arrêter par la police parce qu'on était mal garé, parce qu'on a fait une excès de vitesse ou des choses comme ça, on peut avoir des propos pas très agréables pour la police, au sujet de la police. Ces propos pas très agréables, ils vont être captés par les enfants s'ils sont présents. Et automatiquement, involontairement, on va donner une mauvaise image du policier. Donc, muni de cette image, l'enfant va se retrouver en face du policier. S'il est en conflit avec la loi, le premier policier auquel il va avoir affaire, c'est le policier qui est sur la voie publique. Ce ne sera pas le policier spécialisé. Donc ce policier sur la voie publique n'a pas forcément reçu de formation. Donc il va gérer au mieux ou comme il va pouvoir cet enfant. Avant de mettre à disposition d'un service spécialisé, s'il y en a un. Puisque je vous ai dit tout à l'heure qu'en fonction de la répartition des services spécialisés dans le pays, il peut y avoir des endroits où il n'y aura pas de service spécialisé. Donc, à l'issue de son passage dans la brigade spécialisée, l'enfant, soit s'il y a une possibilité de diversion où il sera présenté devant un magistrat, il aura subi un passage au sein de la police. Même chose pour l'enfant victime. L'enfant victime, il peut être orienté directement vers un service spécialisé par le biais de travailleurs sociaux, par le biais de l'éducation nationale ou de services médicaux. Ou, si les parents d'un enfant victime ne savent pas qu'il y a une brigade spécialisée, ils vont aller à l'endroit le plus près, un commissariat de police, et là l'enfant va être confronté, encore une fois, à des policiers qui ne sont pas formés. Si les policiers ont la connaissance d'un service spécialisé, ils vont conduire l'enfant devant le service spécialisé qui, lui, va gérer au mieux l'affaire, avant que l'enfant, le cas de l'enfant soit traité par la justice. Alors comment informer un policier non spécialisé? Souvent, il n'y a pas beaucoup de formation. Donc l'idée, c'est une solution qu'on a adoptée aussi avec Terre des Hommes, dans le cadre des expertises que j'ai faites, c'est de former des policiers référents, des policiers qui vont être spécialisés dans des endroits où il n'y a pas de service spécialisé, d'unité spéciale. Et ces policiers, s'il y a besoin de quelqu'un, s'il y a besoin de conseils, s'il y a besoin d'une expertise, vont faire au mieux. Après, on a vu que bien souvent les enfants sont le premier contact qu'un enfant va avoir avec la police, ce sera le policier qui est sur la voie publique. Alors comment former ces policiers sur la voie publique? Vaste question. Et vaste chantier aussi. Donc le plus simple, c'est peut-être de commencer, d'intégrer un module spécifique enfant au sein de la formation initiale. Ce module n'a pas besoin d'être extrêmement développé. L'idée, ça va être de donner des notions à tous les policiers, des notions sur la législation relative à l'enfant, un minimum de connaissances sur l'enfant, les droits de l'enfant, et surtout les procédures et les conduites à tenir. Que faire si je suis en face d'un enfant? Qu'est-ce que je dois faire? L'idée, c'est ça. C'est pas une formation qui va prendre des semaines et des semaines. Sur une semaine, une semaine de 30 heures de formation, on peut inclure facilement ça dans un cursus de formation initiale, sans que ça augmente de manière considérable en temps et en budget la formation de ce policier. Donc, si on arrive à former, insérer un module de formation enfant dans la formation initiale, tous les nouveaux policiers qui vont arriver dans les services actifs vont avoir un minimum d'informations. Ils pourront à leur tour faire changer petit à petit les comportements des autres policiers. Mais là, à ce moment-là aussi, on va pouvoir, une fois que le processus est lancé, on va pouvoir aussi commencer à former les policiers qui sont déjà en service et qui ont déjà quelques années de service et qui ont encore longtemps à faire. Donc, l'idée, ça va être d'apporter un minimum de connaissances. Ces connaissances devront être en relation avec le métier du policier, le travail du policier. Si c'est un policier qui est dans un service de maintien de l'ordre, si c'est un policier qui est affecté à l'îlotage, on va essayer de lui apporter des éléments d'information qui vont lui permettre de gérer au mieux un enfant qui va prendre en compte. L'objectif, c'est simplement de changer les comportements des policiers. C'est pas beaucoup, mais quand on part de zéro, c'est le plus difficile quand on veut faire bouger une voiture, c'est de commencer à faire tourner les roues. Donc là, l'effort est le plus dur. Une fois qu'on a commencé à faire tourner les roues, on a vaincu l'inertie, et là, on peut commencer à avancer. Donc l'idée, c'est ça. Donc, une formation, un module de formation adapté dans le cadre de la formation initiale, et puis petit à petit, des formations qui vont être développées au sein de toutes les unités. Alors ça implique bien sûr une hiérarchie qui soit aussi présente et qui fasse avancer les choses, et non pas qui fasse obstacle. Alors la police n'est pas seule à gérer le problème des enfants. La police va travailler avec vous, la justice, les acteurs de justice, que ce soit les magistrats, les juges, les avocats aussi, avec les travailleurs sociaux, avec des médecins, avec la société dans son ensemble. Mais la police ne peut pas tout faire. C'est pas la police contre tout le monde. C'est comme disait Chris, si on ne travaille pas ensemble, on n'arrivera à rien. Et je vais étendre le sujet, c'est pas uniquement de travailler en bonne relation avec la justice, c'est aussi de travailler en bonne relation avec les travailleurs sociaux, c'est travailler aussi en bonne relation avec la médecine. En tant que policier, on va avoir besoin des travailleurs sociaux, on va avoir besoin de la justice, on va avoir besoin de médecins, aussi de la société aura son rôle à jouer aussi dans la gestion de la prise en compte des enfants. Donc, il faut qu'il y ait des passerelles. Il faut que chacun sorte de sa petite bulle, dans son petit monde, et puis essaye de travailler la main dans la main. C'est le seul moyen pour que les choses avancent. Donc, souvent, dans les textes de loi, j'ai vu dans certains textes de loi, par exemple, l'audition d'un enfant nécessite la présence d'un avocat et la présence d'un travailleur social. Si l'avocat ne veut pas se déplacer parce qu'il n'est pas payé, si le travailleur social ne veut pas se déplacer parce qu'il n'a pas de voiture, le policier, il fait quoi? Il va gérer le cas tout seul. Mais on ne pourra pas lui reprocher d'avoir géré le cas d'un enfant sans avocat et sans travailleur social, puisque ces deux-là n'ont pas voulu se déplacer. Donc, chacun il doit y mettre un peu du sien. Hein. C'est pas toujours de la faute du policier. Il faut qu'il y ait un travail en commun. Il faut que tout le monde travaille dans le même objectif, qui est l'intérieur supérieur de l'enfant. Voilà.
Yeah. Very good. So thank you very much. Now I will give the floor to the public for your questions. Please,
Yes, sir. Here.
May I say, please, 1 minute, please. May I say something? It should be a discussion with questions and replies to the speakers. We cannot spend the 45 minutes remaining to listen to description of institutional framework in different countries. It would be very interesting, but the point now is to be very practical, pragmatic on one point which was mentioned by the speakers. We cannot discuss about the globality of the system. We speak about the pragmatic problem of the police, pragmatic problem of the children with the police. And before giving you the floor, I would like to ask if in the debate we could also mention the different conception of the role of the police in the prevention, which has not yet completely been mentioned here, but it's okay. But many people say police should contribute to the prevention. Is it their job? In which way it is their job? So if you can, in your statements or in the public, if there is something about the role of police in prevention. So I will give the floor one by one, and please ask your question. Please also mention your country and your position.
Yes. Hello.
Sir, first, then Mr. here. Okay.
Thank you, sir. This is Sanjay Gupta from India, from Delhi. And really remarkable work which has been done. But my question is that generally it is said that the police role is different. So one thing is how to ensure the motivation for the police. If you work for children, it is not just your duty, it is also a motivating factor in your personal life also. You are helping children or you are doing your duty. We have tried some interventions where children are taken to the police stations, where police officials are being rewarded if they have helped children. In the training, we acknowledge the work of the children. So I just want to learn from the speakers that what is the strategy you are adopting to keep the motivation high of the police to work for children.
Thank you, sir. Which one of the speakers would like to reply, please?
One, have a strategic plan to get people working to a common goal. Two, have measures in that plan to see that it's been achieved. Three, single out police areas that are doing well and improving, and there's the compliance. Because police, one part about police culture is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they're actually quite competitive. And they want to be doing well and want to be seen doing good. And rather than use the, just acknowledge that good and then others have a reference point of what the standard is and they know what they're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Next question, sir.
Thank you. I'm John Patiwal from the Republic of Indonesia. Currently, we are in the new stage of our juvenile justice system. And the question that I would like to pose is that how to change the mindset of the police to implement the restorative justice, the diversion, because as Mr. Bernard said about the dissemination on the diversion toward the society hasn't been done by the police. I'm an advocate, and actually my office is currently doing dissemination with the police to the society. My question is that how can you, both country, the French and the New Zealand, change the mindset of the police from your early stage of the juvenile justice, because we are really in the very beginning of our new juvenile justice system. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I guess that the question is raised also for Norway.
Yeah.
Ma position en tant que policier français est simple, la réponse va être assez simple, c'est qu'en France, la police n'a pas de possibilité de diversion. Donc, elle va mener son enquête et c'est le magistrat qui va prendre la décision, quelle qu'elle soit.
Pardon, on peut répondre à cette question? On peut...
A moment. Yes. Mr. Graverson, you want to add something?
Yes, just to say it will take time. It's not a quick flick of the switch. It will take 3 to 4 years, but gradually build on it.
Mrs. Norman?
And I would just like to add that it takes actually different actions. One is, of course, motivating, and one is competence, but also one is the law. If that is now the main reaction and not a diversion, the police will have to comply.
Mrs. first, then Sir,
Okay.
then you.
Je viens du Niger, je suis commissaire de police chargé de la protection des mineurs et des femmes. Donc c'est par rapport à sa question. Pour que la police ait un changement de comportement, il faut une base juridique. Il faut que la loi interne du pays prévoie la déjudiciarisation pour que la police fasse l'application sous le contrôle du procureur de la République. Comme par exemple, nous avons une loi portant organisation des juridictions pour mineurs qui fixe les attributions de ces juridictions des mineurs. Il a été prévu la justice réparatrice. Donc, sous le contrôle du procureur, le policier peut, à son niveau, procéder à la judiciarisation afin d'éviter la détention aux mineurs. Okay. Le policier ne peut pas travailler sans une base juridique, il faut que la loi nationale le prévoie.
Très bien, merci beaucoup. Est-ce que vous aviez une question, madame, au speaker, ou pas? C'était une remarque seulement.
Oui, c'est juste une complémentarité. Et par rapport à l'intervention de l'ancien policier, il dit d'intégrer un module dans la formation initiale. Nous avons déjà dépassé cette étape au Niger. Cette application va commencer cette année et nous avons également déjà commencé le renforcement des capacités sur le terrain des autres policiers qui sont sur le terrain par rapport à la prise en charge. Tout le système est mis en place. Il nous reste juste les mesures d'accompagnement. Merci.
Thank you very much. Sir, then Mr. Nicolor, yes. First.
Sí, buenas tardes, Carlos Velázquez, Policía del Perú. La pregunta para los expositores va señalada en el sentido que nosotros tenemos un enfoque de funcionarios encargados de hacer cumplir la ley. Hoy escuché un enfoque de participativo, un enfoque de policía que debe orientar inicialmente su trabajo hacia la participación. Si nos podría ampliar un poco sobre el tema.
Somebody wants to reply?
If you're working with civil servants, from a police perspective, you have to work closely with them, and actually it has to be a collaborative approach because you've been policed and you understand that you actually have to get it in a police operational context. And that was the failure of our training initially. We were civil servant based and not police based. But I'll talk later. It'd be better for me.
Somebody want to add something?
Je pense aussi ce qui est important, c'est que il faut que la police montre qu'elle n'a rien à cacher. Donc les portes des locaux de police doivent être ouvertes. Il n'y a aucune raison pour qu'un magistrat ne puisse pas venir simplement passer une journée dans un service de police, voir comment ça se passe. En France, on a des échanges. Des magistrats viennent en stage dans les services de police, mais des policiers vont passer quelques jours dans le bureau d'un procureur, simplement pour voir comment ça se passe. Chacun a une idée plus précise de ce que fait l'autre, et se nouent des liens qui permettent de meilleurs échanges par la suite. L'important, c'est ça, c'est de faire tomber les barrières. de sortir un peu de sa petite chapelle et de son petit monde.
Yeah. Monsieur, please.
مساء الخير. أنا محمود الهروط من وزارة التنمية الاجتماعية الأردن. بداية شكر جزيل للمحاضرين على العرض المميز. السؤال: أيهما أفضل ممارسة للأحداث؟ التعامل بقضاياهم مع الشرطة عموما مع الأمن العام، أم من خلال شرطة متخصصة بهم بمسمى شرطة الأحداث؟
Thank you. Who wants to reply?
You need a specialist group in police. No, absolute. It is dependent what level that specialisation is, but all police need to be aware of children's issues to a certain level. Is that right?
Please, sir. Yes, your question?
Thank you. Thank you for the very interesting presentations. My question is to our colleague from Norway, and it's something very specific because I think it's a very interesting issue that you raise, and I have a feeling we're not going to be covering it anywhere else in this Congress. So I just wanted to ask you, you talked about the new legislation in Norway, and you mentioned about children who have committed serious offences. I assume by serious you mean murder, rape and so on. And I was very interested to hear about the possibility of non-custodial sentencing options in those sorts of situations. Did I understand you correctly, number one? And number two, if that is the case, I think it's really very encouraging because it's something that we are doing a study on this, and we are trying to look for good practice in relation to serious offending, not just because a lot of the discussion we have is usually around minor offending, and we are extremely concerned about what happens to those who commit serious offences. And I would be interested to hear further clarification from you, ma'am, on this issue.
It would take some time, but I'm trying to be brief. Yes, it's serious offences for these youth sanction. And in the law, we have not made any exceptions. But the case and the young person should be suited. And that is an evaluation that is done before the case is taken to court. And by suited, we mean that he or she must admit, not in the legal way, but in the practical way, that they were there. And they must show a motivation to go into this rather severe program. There is going to be the conference meeting. They have to meet their victim. They will have to comply to a plan, and they have to sign the plan to be able to go on. And that means a lot of control measures. It could be anger managing programs. It could even be voluntarily to go into a child welfare institution. It is definitely about to stop using drugs and various forms of control measures, very often then carried out by the police. They can comply to the fact that the police can enter their home at any time, call them up and ask where they are. So it's a heavy control program, and if the case is so-called suited, that will be tried, and all the professionals attending the conference, they will put into it what they think is needed. And then, of course, there will be breaches. And then there will be new conversations, new attempts, and the aim is all the time to keep the youngster out of prison. But, of course, you remain with very few persons in the end, where it's not possible. But Norway is a small country, 5 million people, meaning that at any given time, there is just a few persons convicted to unconditioned prison in Norway. Most of the around 10 persons at any given time in Norway in prison, minors, they are there on remand.
Okay. Sir, and Madam.
Thank
Madam
you.
After. So, please, your question, please.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. My name is Frank Longe, the legal officer to the Inspector General of Police from Nigeria. My question is directed to our colleague, Chris Grevesin, and it borders on the values and approaches. You said detention is where detention is used as a last resort, that it should be for the shortest period of time that is appropriate in the circumstances. I want to ask, in a situation where the domesticated laws of the member state did not make provisions for offenses where juveniles are in conflict with laws, and there is no provisions for bail for those children, what do we do in that circumstances?
Thank you very much. Please.
That's a challenging issue. That's a challenging issue. One, try to get law reform, but that can take time. Two, I would explore that if you had a creative magistrate that they could be in detention and possibly make it home detention. I don't know what the wording of the legislation is. But the fact that after all these years and the Convention of the Rights of the Child has been, and I know I'm speaking to the converted, it shows a lack of reform. The thought that a child can't get bail is, there's no option really. Well, I mean, in the sense it would take law reform, but I'd have to see the legislation to see if there's ways around it to possibly encourage some other approach by the judiciary as to this issue. That's what I would do. So basically, can I just ask, is it basically you just go in detention and that's the only option the court has? Is that what they're saying?
Okay. Sir, your question?
Jean Smith, Pérou. Juste une question sur l'utilisation ou la non-utilisation des menottes lors de la détention. Je voyage dans beaucoup de pays, je l'ai vu très souvent, et dans quelles conditions, si vous l'utilisez, utilise-t-on donc les menottes ou ne pas les utiliser?
Merci. Thank you very much. Who wants to reply?
Je voudrais déjà revenir sur le terme détention. Détention, ça implique une prison, donc on n'est déjà plus dans le domaine du travail, dans le cadre du temps d'interpellation.
L'arrestation.
Ouais. En France, c'est assez limité, le droit pour le policier de menotter, pas seulement les enfants, même les adultes maintenant. Donc le policier doit estimer, en fonction de la connaissance de l'enfant, il y a une grande différence entre un enfant de 17 ans et demi qui fait 1m85 et 90 kg et un enfant de 12 ans qui fait 1m10. Autre différence, un policier seul et 4 policiers. En fait, il y a tous ces éléments à prendre en compte. Mais des textes juridiques ou des textes, les règlements internes de la police, en général, spécifient ça. Donc, en France, ça doit être l'exception. Après, il faut faire la part des choses entre aussi la sécurité de l'enfant. On peut aussi le menotter pour sa propre sécurité. Mais ça, c'est une question d'approche sur le moment. Alors, la règle est difficile. On peut pas définir un enfant à partir de tel âge. La morphologie va faire aussi beaucoup. Donc c'est une règle qui est toujours très très difficile c'est la perception du policier qui normalement c'est dans le meilleur intérêt de l'enfant. On est toujours la même chose. Si les policiers ont reçu une formation adaptée.
Okay. Mrs. first, then we will go a bit far. Then no, Mrs. first. Then okay, it will come.
Okay.
Please, your question.
مساء الخير، أنا رغدة العزام من وزارة التنمية الاجتماعية الأردن. في الحديث عن عدالة الأحداث، أيهما أهم وله الأولوية؟ تغيير اتجاهات أفراد الشرطة في التعامل مع الأحداث أم التركيز على وجود إجراءات محددة يجب على أفراد الشرطة أنه التركيز عليها والاهتمام فيها بغض النظر عن اتجاهاتهم في التعامل مع الأطفال؟
Please.
Number one, police should adopt an engagement rather than an enforcement. Police should adopt an engagement rather than an enforcement strategy. So in other words, communication, build the bridge. Then you get situations that if you have an engagement approach and things escalate, then you can go to an enforcement. But if you start with an enforcement approach first, it's very hard to go back to engagement.
Thank you. Sir, yes, the last one, the last round. Yes, please.
Je suis Chomiano Boubacar du Burkina Faso. Alors, ma question est la suivante. Est-ce que la justice juvénile réparatrice s'applique à toute catégorie d'infractions? Et je parle précisément des infractions criminelles. Et le deuxième volet de ma question, est-ce que la diversion, lorsqu'elle est autorisée par un juge et non un procureur, est-ce qu'on est toujours dans la déjudiciarisation? Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Who wants to reply? Is restorative justice applicable to serious crimes?
Yes, definitely. The New Zealand experience is we do it for everything except murder, and it works. And the interesting thing about restorative justice is actually the more serious the offence, the better it goes. And what I'm saying is the concern is that people think if this is serious, restorative justice would not work. The experience is the more serious the crime, the better it works. I don't know what the science is, but that's the reality. Go, please.
Mrs. Norman.
You made an important point, and Norway has learned a lot from your country. But then in Norway, we can use the restorative justice in addition to a traditional court case, meaning that a very, very serious crime, and if we're speaking of young people, there could be a very short prison sentence in a special children's unit, and then this diverting sanction. But in other cases, not only speaking about young people, there could be the possibility of using restorative justice in addition to another sentence to have a much better chance to rehabilitate the offender.
Thank you, sir. So, yes. Then.
Merci.
Then, yes.
Jean-Luc Ronget, de Défense des Enfants International France. Je voulais intervenir parce que M. Grafson parlait tout à l'heure que les policiers étaient souvent en première ligne, évidemment, dans la justice juvénile. Et M. Sinsart rappelait que ce n'est pas les policiers spécialisés qui, eux, vont se trouver en première ligne, mais c'est plutôt les policiers d'intervention, les îlotiers ou quoi. Et effectivement, on voit que l'image de la police dont il a parlé est assez mauvaise dans certains quartiers, dans certaines villes, dans certains endroits. Mais il faut dire aussi qu'il y a un problème de culture. Il y a un problème de culture que, enfin en tout cas pour la France, il pourra me répondre, mais sur lequel on n'est pas encore revenu. Il y a une enquête de Open Society sur les contrôles au faciès qui montre quand même que la culture policière à l'égard d'une certaine population est assez discriminatoire, ce qui peut, je pense, avoir un effet sur l'image qu'on a de la police. Il y a le problème de l'identification des policiers. J'aimerais bien savoir où ça en est, parce que ce n'est pas toujours le cas, et le problème des difficultés d'introduire des plaintes, puisque même les autorités indépendantes, les ombudsmen, parlent des difficultés qu'ils ont pour instruire ces plaintes. Et j'aimerais autant avoir une réponse, d'autant que depuis les événements de janvier, en France, on aime la police. Et c'est un suffisamment bon moment pour pouvoir changer ça, d'autant que le Premier ministre est un ancien ministre de l'Intérieur. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. You raise a lot of points in your question, which is okay. Who wants to reply?
Au sujet de l'identification des policiers, les policiers français portent tous leur numéro matricule, donc l'identification est possible. Au sujet du comportement des policiers, on peut en discuter, mais toute plainte en France, il est relativement facile de déposer plainte contre un policier, donc il n'y a aucun souci. Je pense que la France est un des pays où la police est le plus contrôlée. Il y a de nombreux organes de contrôle de la police. Donc
Okay. Next question, please.
Merci. C'est Moussa Guino, conseiller juridique au ministère de la Femme, de l'Enfant et de la Famille du Mali. J'ai écouté avec intérêt l'exposé du Français qui a exposé sur la police, mais à mon entendement, il a parlé beaucoup de la formation de la police. Le thème, c'est le rôle de la police dans la justice juvénile. Ma première question dans ce sens, dès qu'un mineur est appréhendé, quel est le rôle que la police doit jouer avant de saisir la justice? Deuxième question, il a même dit dans son exposé, au cas si la police ne parvient pas à joindre les avocats ou bien les associations qui sont à la disposition des mineurs pour leur placement, il dit, là, il n'y a pas de problème. Ça veut dire que la police est bloquée à ce niveau. Or, ma conseillère du Niger vient de le dire, chez moi au Mali, il y a un code qui porte sur la minorité. Tout est clair dedans. Bon, je me demande si en France, c'est le même cas. Son rôle par rapport à l'appréhension du mineur et au cas si par exemple à joindre les avocats ou les associations pour la défense des droits des hommes.
Thank you very much. You want to reply?
Quand je parlais de cette impossibilité de joindre des avocats ou des travailleurs sociaux, je ne parlais pas de la France, je parlais de mes expériences dans des pays africains. Après, en dernier ressort, si on ne peut pas joindre un avocat, si on ne peut pas joindre un travailleur social, si c'est prévu dans les textes, le policier va rendre compte au magistrat. Hein, et c'est le magistrat qui va prendre des décisions. Donc, en dernier ressort, c'est le magistrat qui va décider, qui va dire aux policiers, qui va donner aux policiers les instructions pour travailler.
Okay.
Okay. I am Hugo Morales from Peru. I prefer to talk in Spanish. ¿Cuál es su opinión sobre la prevención?
Excuse me, sir. We did not understand what you said. Please.
Sí, thanks a million for your presentations. My name is Hugo Morales. I am from Peru.
Peru.
Okay. I prefer to talk in Spanish. ¿Cuál es su opinión como policías y también para la asesora del Ministerio de Justicia de Noruega de la participación de la policía en escuelas o vecindarios para realizar actividades de deterrence, de disuasión? Estados Unidos tiene muchos programas como el DARE, el Get 8, para entrar a las escuelas, por ejemplo, y decir a los jóvenes no delincan, no hagan delitos. ¿Qué entrenamiento, si es que existe, la policía tiene para vincular su presencia en espacios como la escuela o los vecindarios para que las personas, al escucharlas o verlas, dejen de delinquir? ¿Es un método efectivo en sus países? ¿Es algo que realmente tiene sentido? Gracias.
Very shortly, preventive police work with a great focus on children is being available at the police academy as a post-graduation on a master level. So they can do preventive police work there. That's one way. Another way is to start working, the police working, and showing an interest in working with these areas. The police officers, in Oslo, we have several stations, and every school has its own police officer. So if there are any trouble, they will always be contacted, this one person whom they know. That means the pupils, a lot of them, but also the administration of the school. So if they feel that they need a police officer acutely present or to solve a problem, to give some information, they will always have a person with a name to contact for a start with. Police officers in Norway generally have rather good trust, so they are popular in the schools mostly, and that makes it easier if the situation is getting really difficult, because if someone comes to solve a difficult situation, there is at least someone they know. It will take a lot of time to go further into that.
If you, please.
I think an important point to remember here is that children, we talk about not committing crime, but what we should actually be thinking about from a prevention focus with children is not becoming a victim. Because children are more likely to be a victim than they are to be an offender. And many children who are victims of abuse go on to be offenders because of the abuse. We have a program called, I won't go into detail, about keeping ourselves safe. So you have to think prevention is also about preventing them from becoming a victim. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you allow me, I would like to ask to the head of the youth police brigade of the city of Geneva, who is here, if he would like to add something to the replies of the other speakers. Mr. Dar, please.
Oui, bonsoir, Pierre-Alain Dard. Je suis effectivement le chef de la brigade des mineurs du canton de Genève. Merci à tout le monde de votre intervention. J'aimerais juste répondre peut-être, donner mon opinion par rapport à ces programmes de prévention qu'un policier pourrait aller faire dans les classes. C'est un sujet assez délicat et je crois que si on veut faire ce genre de programme, il faut le faire avec l'aide d'autres professionnels. Nous sommes entrés dans la police, Laurent Sinsart, Cliff Graveston et moi, pour combattre le crime. Et c'est un autre métier d'aller parler aux enfants, d'aller leur transmettre un message. C'est un métier pédagogique et la plupart des policiers ne sont pas formés pour ça. Alors je préfère que les policiers ne s'y aventurent pas s'ils se sentent pas à l'aise de le faire et il faut être très attentif aux messages délivrés. Par ailleurs, je signale juste que les études criminologiques à ce sujet ne sont pas concordantes. Vous pouvez lire Maurice Cusson, vous parliez, monsieur, du programme DARE, particulièrement le programme DARE aux États-Unis ne fait pas diminuer la consommation de drogue chez les jeunes. Elle pourrait peut-être même avoir un léger effet incitatif. Donc il faut être très très prudent et surtout ne pas travailler seul mais en interdisciplinaire.
Merci, thank you. You want to add something? No? Yeah, okay. Sir, first you were raising hands several times. Then, sir, yes, please, your question.
Merci. Je suis le chef de brigade spéciale chargé des mineurs en conflit avec la loi en Mauritanie. Sur la prévention, c'est une mission, vous savez, la police elle a un rôle de prévention d'une manière générale. Et en tant que chef de brigade de mineurs, on peut pas, il n'est pas autorisé de rentrer dans les établissements scolaires pour contrôler les enfants ni dans les jardins, mais à la rentrée ou à la sortie, s'il y a des marches des enfants, toujours on les protège. Et nous, en Mauritanie, nous avons une loi spécifiquement destinée aux enfants. Il s'agit de l'ordonnance de protection pénale de l'enfant. Et je pose une question selon la longue expérience de mes collègues et de Madame la juriste qui est parmi nous ici. La plupart des problèmes, c'est les enfants récidivistes qui ont commis des infractions, passés par les parquets, jugés d'instruction, condamnés et purgés leur peine. Et où va ces enfants? On les trouve le lendemain, on les rattrape, nous, en tant que policiers chargés, en état de même infraction ou d'autres infractions. Okay. Donc, il n'y a pas un programme stratégique pour sauver ce genre d'enfants, pour orienter ailleurs et de les faire éloigner de la chemin de la criminalité. Est-ce qu'il y a-t-il une expérience à ce sujet que on peut baser sur pour que nous aider dans nos pays respectifs? Et je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mrs. Norman.
Repeated or severe crime, the ones doing that are the target group, is the target group for these new juvenile sanctions. But there has also been programs, and I know them best in Oslo, where you have had a specific program working towards the group of the ones doing repeated crimes. And the statistics shows that most young offenders offend only once. And then you end up with a small group offending continuously. And we have had special programs for that, and they have been led with quite success. And maybe the key word is in the individual, that the programs, when you met these young people, they have been seen as individual cases, not as a group. And that has been the key word to success. And the Oslo police has really managed to reduce this group. Of course, there are coming new individuals to it, but it shows that being active and staying in for sufficient time, it gives success in pulling them out and to give them what they need. Some of the young people have fallen out of school. They need specific training. They could be psychological problems, but they are seen as individuals and met as individuals.
Thank you. Sir, your question, please. We
Yes,
still have 15 minutes, so please.
My name is Diego. I work in Nairobi in a program with Juvenile Justice. Actually, one of the entry points we have in our program is the police stations. Now, we do a lot of training with police to support reforms and so on, but yet police stations become a place often of mistreatment, sometimes of abuse. And this is an ethical problem which is difficult to address because it's kind of a culture. There's corruption, attitudes which are negative. My question is there any program in place anywhere where these issues are dealt with? Because really we are in trouble, we don't know. It is not a cognitive problem to understand the regulations or the rules or to give skills. There is an ethical issue.
Yes, please.
I think there's a major cultural issue too with that ethical issue. And the only way it will ever be resolved is some very strong leadership within those stations to actually change the behaviours. But if there's the level of corruption that there is, it's not an overnight answer. It's not a quick fix. I wish I knew the answer. Laurent might have the answer now, but yeah, I'd have to talk more detail, some possible ideas.
You want? No? Sir, here, then, sir. Please, your question, please.
Patrick Shanahan, I work with street children across Africa, have done so for the last 30-odd years of my life. Currently conducting a large survey piece of research, 3 years long, into 3 African cities. It is about the same elephant in the room that I want to ask. Where corruption is endemic, how is it possible to put the position of the child into the forefront that we are demanding and that our speakers have tried to show us this evening? I currently am carrying around, in case people start to query me, a piece from our huge database which is about police violence to children, specifically street children, who are of course at the bottom of every heap of any group of children. It is 49 pages long. I would like to know, where do we begin to convey to not just to governments but to police colleges who can in fact influence their own governments? Otherwise, what we have heard tonight is, for people like me, almost a waste of time.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Please.
I think that has to be led by police. And sometimes it happens where someone will start something and it will become accepted and changed. One, and I'm ignorant of the exact detail, you have, if possible, if I was that situation, I would find a small group of police and, if possible, have a police manager who would support it to actually start working with street children, an actual small police, so they can see the benefits. And then hopefully build on that. That would be my start point. Turn up.
In the 3 cities the research is being conducted in, that's Accra, Bukavu in Eastern Congo, and Harare, there is no police volunteer available or allowed at present to join fully rather than part-time into this question, which is why it is crucial to the future of street children across the continent.
Yeah, I agree. No, that's a challenge.
Sir, yes, please, your question.
Oui, je suis Morgan Raymond.
Merci.
vous m'entendez?
Je suis le commandant Akobi, je suis de la gendarmerie, je suis en service.
Non,
c'est pas moi.
Monsieur.
C'est le bon?
Oui, c'est bon.
Ok, c'est parti. Donc je suis Morgan Raymond, je suis juge des enfants à Monaco. J'ai une question assez précise pour Madame Norman. Je voulais savoir dans quelle mesure un tribunal ou un juge spécialisé pouvait être informé de la réussite ou non de ce processus alternatif de traitement donc des mineurs délinquants. Et mon autre question, c'est est-ce que la victime doit accepter, la victime de l'infraction commise par un mineur doit accepter ce processus alternatif? Est-ce qu'elle peut le contester? Est-ce qu'elle peut demander à ce que l'affaire soit quand même portée devant un tribunal? Parce qu'il est clair qu'on doit défendre les intérêts des mineurs, l'intérêt supérieur du mineur, mais également l'intérêt de la victime, puisqu'elle doit être reconnue en tant que telle, et parfois ça doit passer par un procès. Donc voilà quelle est la réponse de la justice norvégienne. Merci.
Norway, yes, please. Mrs. Norman.
It's a very interesting question. We are at the implementation, and the judges are vital for our success. The judges has got through the legislation a new possibility, a new choice, but of course the judge will do his job as normal. So the important issue is that the case is very well enlightened with all the possibilities in this alternative reaction. It is taken in the law as an alternative, which leaves the decision to the judge. And if the youth plan is broken and the case goes back to the court, the judge will have the task to decide whether the young person then has to go to jail and for how long time, because a sentence of 3 months prison would be like a 2-year follow-up plan. So if he has followed 8 months with very intensive care, it's not only to use the mathematics. He will have, or she will have, to use their skills to find out proportionally what is left, or should there be another chance?
Thank you very much. Mrs. Yes?
Merci Monsieur le Président. Nathalie Cocherens, je suis juge des mineurs en Suisse, dans le canton de Neuchâtel. Et j'ai trouvé intéressant les remarques de Monsieur Sinsart sur la parité homme-femme dans les brigades des mineurs. J'ai suivi plusieurs conférences internationales dans d'autres domaines et j'ai été frappée que celles-ci contiennent une assemblée en grande majorité féminine. Donc on voit que souvent la justice des mineurs est quelque chose qui se féminise. Même certains cantons, dans le canton de Vaud, ne connaît quasiment que des juges des mineurs femmes, ce qui est aussi pas sans poser quelques problèmes. Ma question elle est plus directe pour les policiers. Est-ce que on doit tenir compte de besoins spécifiques des filles mineures qui sont arrêtées, qui passent en fait dans les mains de la police, ou est-ce que pour vous il n'y a pas de problème spécifique aux filles qui délinquent?
Oui, on me fait signe qu'au niveau de l'interprétation, il faudrait que nous puissions arrêter brièvement. Donc je propose de laisser répondre. I propose to let the speaker answer and we will conclude.
En fait, au sujet de la prise en compte d'une mineure fille féminine, ça va dépendre des textes en vigueur. En France, par exemple, la police, notamment pour les fouilles de sécurité, c'est obligatoirement fait par une personne de même sexe. Donc après, pour ce qui est de la prise en compte, l'entretien et ces choses-là, ça va aussi dépendre des circonstances. Des filles préféreront discuter avec des hommes, d'autres avec. C'est pour ça que l'idéal, c'est d'avoir dans un service à la fois des hommes et des femmes. Et il n'y a pas d'expert à ce moment-là. Le courant passe ou ne passe pas. Des fois ça marche, des fois ça marche pas. Il y a pas de. Il faut être assez modeste là-dessus. L'important, c'est que le dialogue s'installe.
Très bien. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you to your assistants. I would like to close by two points, very brief. First, having worked in an NGO for training about juvenile justice, in many countries, Africa, but Asia or wherever, very often people say to us, you are right, we are convinced of restorative justice, but we have a huge lack of financial capacities. We have no money to do it. I would like to I notice what says Mrs. I don't know your name, from Niger. Niger is not a very rich country. Sorry? Yes. It's a poor country. And you explained briefly that you have already some good initiative in terms of law, in terms of practice. And I would like to say, let us stop to consider that all solutions are first a question of budget. It's a question of training. It's a question of innovative social innovations which come from any culture. It's a question of the will of individuals, the will of political wills, but also individual wills, to be innovative, to experiment, to have pilot projects, etc., etc. So I would like to note what you said. You are, to some extent, you are an example of its capacity of innovation, even if there are not so much budget. And my last point will be technical about the workshop. As for any other workshop, all the PowerPoint presentation of the speakers will be not after 5 minutes like in YouTube, but will be on the website of the Congress. I mentioned this morning the platform of these Congress documents, and all these documents which were presented by the speakers will be soon on this website. You may consult. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for your interest, for your questions, and have a nice continuation of this Congress. Thank you and good night.
Very well run.
Relax my name.
So you did it well. That's not.